Hey, Larken Rose here, back in front of this LSD trip, because there's currently a cat in my studio. Hopefully he's not destroying the place. Philosophy, like voluntarism, and talking about moral principles and stuff like that, is a separate field of thought from propaganda and psychology. They're related, as I often point out. But there are a lot of people who are all the way advocates of freedom and self-ownership and non-aggression who don't seem to spend a whole lot of time actually thinking about how the game works. And so they jump to conclusions in a whole bunch of different directions that don't actually make sense, and it doesn't really help for them to do that. And I'm going to use the example that just came up of Elon Musk posting a thing, being critical of Trump's big, beautiful bill of massive federal spending. You got to do it. And so Musk just posted a thing, I think he called it an abomination, and said, shame on anyone who voted for it. So I posted that and thought it was funny, and was like, okay, Trumpites, are you now going to condemn Elon Musk as a traitorous libtard who won't bow to the great and glorious Mango Mussolini? Or what? Because you were cheering for both of them 2 seconds ago, and now one of them's being critical of the other ones. Now what do you do? But predictably, a bunch of people commenting under my flippant post about that had their guesses in different directions about what it actually means. Is this something they're putting on for show? Is it that Elon Musk, now sees the light? Is it... And so I see guesses going around in all directions, but this makes a perfect example for a thing I've wanted to talk about for a while anyway, so I'll do that now. There are nasty people in the world, and there's a disproportionate number of nasty people in government. However, there's still people, and I think some pro-freedom people can sort of get the impression that there's some overarching big club where all the people in power meet and go, okay, what evil are we going to do today? Let's plan to do evil. Now, the funny thing is, I think there are a number of sociopaths and psychopaths who do plan things, and they have no moral qualms. They don't view it as evil. They just don't care. It's just, hey, if we play these war games and murder these people and do this horrible stuff, we make lots of money. So it's not about, they're not even trying to be evil. They're just, some of them are on a power trip because one of the things about psychopaths is they sort of delight in the feeling of power over others, which you could call that evil, fair enough. But a lot of the time they're just self-centered and they just don't care. They're all the way callous. They have no empathy, which is sort of the foundation of what it is to be a sociopath. Is they just don't give a crap about other people. They still function like human beings. They're not all-knowing, they're not all-powerful, and there are still incentives and disincentives and stuff. Now, between all the way the sociopaths and voluntarists, most of the world is statist to one degree or another, and most of the world cheers for one version or another of statist violence against their neighbors, taxing people for things that the people don't want to pay for, writing laws about things that control behaviors and outlaw victimless crimes, to violently dominate their fellow man in ways that are totally immoral. That's most of humanity, and most of humanity thinks they're still being the good guys when they do that. They don't think, I'm going to diabolically do that. Well, that goes up into politics to some degree, especially on more local levels and small, like state levels or local governments. I could see more people playing the game and thinking they're doing the right thing and making a difference. Actually, I have a movie I want to make called Making a Difference, but we'll save that for a later time. But they they will sell out to certain degrees and like, okay, I'll vote for this thing if you'll vote for my thing because I think this is good. And yeah, that's a compromise. I realize it's a little bit bogus and it's not something I'd say in front of my voters that I'm going to support this slightly shady thing to get what I want. When you apply power to human nature, you get a whole spectrum from people selling out a little tiny bit to pretty much to a lot to all the way being psychopaths. But it seems like a lot of pro-freedom people think that, no, you're either a voluntarist or a psychopath. No, you're not. There's lots of people who at least enter politics thinking they're the good guy. Now, people can think they're the good guy and not at all be the good guy. Like, good intentions don't mean what you're doing is good. In fact, that's sort of the problem with government and collectivism and authoritarianism is people think, well, if the force of this thing called government is legitimate and moral and it has the right to do these things, and people have an obligation to fund it and obey it, then think of all the good that I could do with the ring of power or that my guy could do. All these habits I don't like, pass a law against them. All these things I want to have happen, tax the crap out of people to pay for them. So you get evil results from good intentions by way of the belief in government, like every single time to one degree or another. But speaking of the people who are up there like Elon Musk, now, I'll start with this so people don't have to have a tantrum about this. Of course, the propagandists and manipulative psychos in power know full well the game of controlled opposition and putting on a show. We're going to pretend to be against this bill, and golly gee, we didn't quite have enough votes to defeat it, but we're going to object really loudly. Even though all of them wanted it, they just wanted credit for pretending to be against it. And then it passed, and they got the power anyway. Made no difference. They put on a show of being against it. And even the ones who voted for it would be like, well, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in this bill that I really don't like, and yeah, we're gonna try to undo that later, like that's ever gonna happen. But right now, we had to do this compromise because it was necessary, and this was a crisis, and bullshit, piles of bullshit. Even more bullshit. That's why I voted for you to have less freedom, and for us in government to have more power and more money. That's only happened 80 bajillion billion times. Some of the people sort of kind of mean it. Now, I'm going to talk about Elon Musk. The point of this isn't Elon Musk in particular, but how you look at people who are out there saying what they think. And I would apply the same thing to like Jimmy Dore, who leads hard left, still a statist. Russell Brand, who's very much was Hollywood leftist before, now wandering into Christian right, and just kind of a confusing mess. But I just want to focus on Elon Musk. Now, the purpose isn't to argue about him in particular. See if you can imagine somebody who's a little bit, is he Asperger's or autistic? He's something. Like that's accepted. He says so. I forget exactly what it is. Where like his I don't know what you call it, his personality behavior is a little bit weird in certain ways. And that's just, okay, that's true of a lot of people. Picture somebody like him who's had lots of influence, lots of money. He's been able to do big, let's send rockets to the moon, let's send them to Mars. And is smart enough to sort of have some ideas and rich enough to hire the people who actually know how to make the ideas happen. I do not for a moment, now you can disagree if you want, I do not for a moment believe that Elon Musk himself has the knowledge to make a functioning rocket. I just don't. But he knows how to hire people who do, because that's an insanely complex task. In fact, I don't know that there's any one person who knows enough about all the different things involved to actually do it by themselves. So that's not a dig at him. It's just saying anybody who's thinking he's all-knowing because he sent a rocket to the... Well, not by himself, he didn't. So you get this guy, he has lots of influence, and he goes, he believes in the state, he's obviously a statist. He probably believes in the militaristic propaganda about the U.S. military protects our freedoms, because most Americans believe that bullshit. So he probably thinks, they offered to do the government contract for this many $1 billion if SpaceX or whatever Musk companies we'll provide this and build that and do whatever. Oh, I'll do that. So here's the thing. It can take an effort to try to get in the mind of somebody who you know is massively fundamentally wrong about some pretty important things, but still sympathize with them. And I don't mean morally, like, it's okay, you meant well. I mean, think what it would be like if you were in the mindset of you believe in the U.S. military and America is the greatest, blah, blah, and the patriotic stuff, and you're obviously a statist, and you play for these things. And then along the way, there may be a thing like, well, you can get this bajillion billion-dollar military contract, but there's something a little bit shady about something going on, and maybe you're going to look the other way because it's a lot of money. And most people would totally do that. Consider the possibility. Now, I don't at all know if this is the case, but consider the possibility that Elon Musk, with his weirdness and the stuff he knows, actually meant well. And he was actually excited. We're going to cut spending and we're going to do these great things and reduce all this fraud and waste in government. Imagine he actually thought that was what was going to happen. Now, maybe he knew that was bullshit from the beginning. My guess, and it's just a guess, is he actually thought that Trump gave a shit about any of that. And Trump never did. Trump is 100% controlled opposition. Everything he says is a manipulative lie. We can argue about that later if you want, and I can explain why I think that. With Musk, I'm not sure either way. But there are a lot of people like, well, if he works with Trump, then he's all the way evil and he must be at all these meetings where they're saying, what can we do that's evil? Including, I can totally see some nerd who's into technology thinking, it'd be so cool if we could have a chip and a brain and interface with things directly so we could control things. I could imagine a nerd thinking that was really cool and not taking the 5 seconds to think, what would government do if we all had chips in our brain? Because holy crap, which is what probably most of the people who watch my videos would immediately jump to. Holy crap, that would immediately mean inside your own head you have technology that you don't understand and you don't control. Screw that. Let's not do that. But I could totally see people thinking, oh, it'd be really cool to have an interface with your very thoughts. Also, I think Musk and a bunch of others are kind of delusional in what they think is possible in that realm, but that's a completely different discussion. But I can imagine that he means well and kind of sold out here and there, and that he's actually genuinely annoyed when Trump pushed his big, beautiful bill and just dozes just out the window. That was all a show. So maybe Elon Musk really is pissed off somewhere thinking, I was just used to put on a show. They didn't do any of the cuts. And Massey is out there saying, how about if we actually do the cuts that you've been making this big flamboyant show about for so many weeks, and then just ignoring and shelving and then massively increasing federal spending. So I would talk to Elon Musk assuming he meant well, only because if he doesn't mean well, it doesn't matter what you say to him. Being nice to somebody who's a conniving sociopath, don't put them in a position where they can hurt you. But if you talk to them assuming the best from a safe distance while heavily armed, that doesn't do any harm. So with Elon Musk, I would still be willing to talk to him as if he actually means well, and as if he actually thought that what he was doing was going to reduce fraud and cut spending and that sort of stuff. But there are so many pro-freedom people who just immediately decide, well, he's worked with that guy, so he's evil. As if the human brain can just go flying from, well, he was this sort of weird guy, he sold this stuff, and he's a sellout, and he's a statist and stuff. Now he's just the root of all evil, because he must have been to get into that position. And it's weird that people don't think that through. Now, there totally are times, a lot of times, when government puts on a show and fakes a fight and pretends to be opposition and pretends that there's some argument between people. That could totally be the case here. I don't see how that even helps them very much, because Trump's doing exactly what I said he was going to do before the first time he was in office, because I actually understand how this crap is played and how the game works. he's going to do what's only happened 80, 100,000, jillion, bazillion, million, trillion times before, all over the world through all of history, which is somebody comes along, points at the existing injustices and authoritarianism and says, oh, that's just terrible. Give me power and I will fix that. But then, golly gee, when they get power, they increase authoritarian control. They increase taxes, like by way of tariffs. They increase the Orwellian surveillance state, like by the crap they tried to hide in the big, beautiful bill of a giant $500 billion AI, like Terminator-style monstrosity. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just look it up. Trump's doing exactly what I said he was going to. He's going to increase the warmongering, increase federal. We need a big, beautiful $1 trillion military budget. Because being way the biggest military in the universe wasn't enough, so we need even more for warmongering. So he did exactly what I said he was going to do, because that's what controlled opposition does, and that's what he always was, and there are a bunch of indications. People can fall for his crap. Like most people who fell for Trump's crap aren't fans of the deep state of authoritarianism, even though they just help empowered it by way of their ignorance. They actually wanted less federal spending and less corruption and stuff, and they put their hopes in this frickin' clown. And now a lot of them are like, they don't want to admit that, oh, their clown he's just a continuation of the same obnoxious, offensive atrocity. Just didn't do anything, didn't change anything. So a lot of people, having sort of put themselves behind Trump, don't want to admit, well, that was dumb and hugely counterproductive and didn't accomplish anything. So some people are hanging on to that. Some are finally speaking out and going, this is dreadful and stupid and ridiculous, including Elon Musk. Now, did he mean that or was he putting on a show? Don't know. You can guess all you want in the comments. But I think skipping over the humanity of people in power and just deciding, well, if you're part of the machine, you're all the way evil, is a huge mistake. One example is, I know a huge number of former military people who are now voluntarists. Like, a lot. In fact, some of the most sort of zealously determined, hardworking voluntarists I know were part of the murder machine. Thankfully, a lot of them didn't actually have to commit the murder themselves. Some of them did. Not have to, but did. They were in a position where they were in combat and did horrible things. But they're still people, and even the people in government are still people. If you don't first learn how the game works, you'll be really quick to condemn and stab in the back anybody who believes in government, which is almost everybody in the world, or who goes into the system thinking they're going to make a difference and actually accomplish something. Maybe that includes Elon Musk. Maybe he meant well. Now, if so, he was delusional and clueless, and he's learning the hard way. What a waste of time that was. So now he's just sort of gone. He's out of Doge, and he's turning around and going, this was just horrible. This is an abomination. Shame on everybody who voted for this. That to me, if that was controlled opposition and making up an argument, it wasn't a very good move on their part, because you're basically taking one of the heroes of the political right and having him bash the other hero of the political right now and go, this is crap. He didn't mention Trump. He's trying to be nice. Although it happens so quickly, it wouldn't surprise me at all in the near future if Elon Musk is sort of being more direct in the betrayal that Trump has committed against every single person who's ever supported him. Because that's what he is. He's a lying scumbag con man. Some people knew that way before he ever ran for office. Be that as it may, the point is, whether it's Elon Musk or anybody else, try to imagine yourself being someone whose beliefs, however stupid, political beliefs, however destructive and immoral, are honestly held, and you really think, I can do good with this power. Because that's been a ton of people, and they're corrupted, and then horrible things happen, and there have been, I know very little about him. I've seen a few quotes, So if you say below, yeah, but he's dumb on this. Justin Amash, is it, who was in Congress? I'm probably saying it wrong too. Who was in Congress, and I know some people who were in Congress way back in '94, the Republican Revolution, who basically ran for Congress and won, and the Republicans had the House and the Senate and the White House. They're like, now we can cut things. Nothing got cut. Everything got expanded. There was just more authoritarianism. But some of the new people who got in, who had never been in public office before, they'd never been parasites before, they were like businessmen, they came out and said, yeah, what they show you on CNN, that's not how it works. We were sat down real quick and told, here's how this works. You will kiss the ass of these people. You will vote for these authoritarian bullshit things if you ever want us to vote for any bill you ever do to get relevance for yourself. And the politicians just came back out and said, I can't do anything. I went in wanting to actually hack down federal spending and slash and burn taxes. I can't. Nobody can. That's not the way the system functions. It's not how it's built. So some of the people who went in with good intentions came out and said, sorry, good intentions don't do shit in there. And so that's, if somebody all the way keeps their integrity after heading in with good intentions, that's what they sound like on the way out. If people start to compromise, which is almost everybody, well, I'll vote for this thing if maybe I can make a little bit of difference on this bill over here. It's like, you've already sold out, shut up. But those are still people, and they're still, most of them, trying to tell themselves that they're the good guy. That's what they want to think inside their own head. I suspect that Elon Musk thinks that he's one of the good guys, and I base that on seeing interviews with him and stuff. I think, my guess, well, I can say good intentions, but there's a lot of that doesn't, like literally a bunch of Nazis had good intentions. They thought that was the right thing to do, have this big authoritarian monstrosity. People who voted for Mao and Stalin and all that collectivist bullshit, they thought, well, maybe we need a big, powerful, authoritarian thing. And then it got more and more evil and destructive and homicidal. And then people have to either go, well, that's not what I wanted, or sell their soul completely, or whatever. Here's the problem. If you immediately reject anybody for being statist because they're in the public eye or they have an audience, you're stabbing people in the back who may very well be hugely helpful allies to voluntarism. Because nothing helps make voluntarists more than getting stabbed in the back by the system over and over again. And I know a bunch of people. I just met a couple people. I was at the screening of Barnum World, which will be out, I think, tomorrow. Then I'll be telling people about it and telling people to check it out because it was awesome. But I met a couple people there who were like, yeah, I played this game and I voted for Trump and got stabbed in the back. I was like, oh, well, that sucked. That's a lot of the world that has to go through that. They have to play the game and believe the state is BS and then figure it out. Now, if somebody like Elon Musk genuinely thinks he's the good guy, and that doesn't mean I think his beliefs are good, because he's a statist and he believes in a bunch of like transhumanist bullshit, or seems to anyway. That doesn't mean he can't figure out, well, this is bad, so at least I can condemn this. And maybe he could actually, like, listen to somebody saying, here's why your attempts to fix things by way of government were doomed to fail to begin with. And maybe he would even say something or have a discussion about it. And that's, look at the example of Joe Rogan. And the people who say, he's a sellout, blah, blah, blah. He's had so many people, he's had a bunch of people on who believe things that I think are just patently stupid. And Joe Rogan isn't a super genius, and he doesn't pretend to be. Like, he has people on and has discussions with them that are interesting. Some of them are totally cringeworthy because people are on there spewing bullshit, and Joe, to one degree or another, may not fully understand why it's bullshit, because maybe that's not a field of thought that he knows that much in, which he will be the first to admit. But given that he has this platform and interviews a bunch of people, including a bunch of anarchists, like Michael Malice, and a bunch of people all the way bashing the system, look how much the system hated him when he was saying, yeah, maybe this vaccine isn't that necessary, and it might be bad, and maybe you can just do this stuff. And they just hated him for that. And that was just him having discussions. He's still a statist. He believes in government, because almost everybody does. But if you're suspicious and paranoid, I understand there's kind of reason to be, because government is evil and they will play all sorts of games. So I'm not saying, oh, take everybody at their word and just trust everybody who pretends to be on your side. No, don't do that. But actually examine people on an individual basis and try to put yourself in their position. That's why I know Trump is absolutely controlled opposition. Because if I try to put myself in his position and say what he has said, the only way to do that is to all the way be a narcissistic, control freak, lying con man, scumbag asshole. And that's what he is. There isn't an honest, well-intentioned version of a human being that does what he does and says what he says. There isn't one. There can be one, I don't know if there is, but there can be one of Elon Musk. Yeah, he's totally statist and has a bunch of dumb ideas, but he may have actually thought they were going to slash federal spending. So instead of immediately stabbing him in the back when he goes, wait, this big beautiful bill is big beautiful bullshit, then maybe reach out to him and say, maybe somebody can get your ear for a second and tell you why that was doomed to happen. And maybe you can be somebody who has a discussion about it in public, because that matters more than somebody condoning it. Like the number of discussions Joe Rogan has had with anarchists and a bunch of people exposing all sorts of evil crap, that's been hugely valuable. Even with Joe being a statist the whole time, he still believes in government, still believes in law and that nonsense. But those discussions being in front of that many people is hugely worthwhile. And if you're going to cut everybody off from any discussion, we're not going to talk to them, we're not going to reach out to them because they did something statist, well, you're cutting off the whole world. You're literally cutting off literally every single person who needs to hear about the ideas of self-ownership and non-aggression and all that. Because by definition, those are the people who still believe government's legitimate. They still think government is a valid way to try to fix things by way of authoritarian political violence against their fellow man. They still think that. If you won't talk to those people and you'll immediately condemn all those people as evil automatically, instead of view a whole lot of them as mistaken and duped, but kind of well-intentioned and trying to be good people, if you're just going to cut them off instead, you're never going to accomplish anything. And ironically, that is exactly what people in power actually want. So they'd love it if every time somebody kind of somewhere on the normal status spectrum goes, hey, I don't like this war and I don't like this government thing and I don't trust them to have this surveillance state. And if every time they do that you go, he's controlled opposition, he's paid puppies, stab him in the back, I don't want to talk to him. The people in power are like, okay, cool. Because the last thing we want is somebody who already has a platform and a stage and has mostly been spewing statist bullshit to get the ear of those people who don't believe in ruling classes at all and maybe have a discussion about that and maybe have the rest of the world see that discussion. So yeah, if anybody sort of leaves our camp, whether one political party or just statism entirely, or is starting to doubt it, anybody well-known with an audience, what the people in power most want is for all the pro-freedom people out there to immediately stab them in the back. Say, well, you worked for them, so we don't want to talk to you, and we don't trust you, and we think you're inherently automatically evil. So yeah, I wouldn't just assume that Elon Musk is automatically, purely, and completely evil, despite a bunch of beliefs that I think he's stupid on and beliefs that he has that I think are immoral. He won't think that, but I think they are. Things he advocates that are immoral, things he's done by way of government grants and helping the military and stuff. But the ideas of actual self-ownership and non-aggression and voluntarism and not having a ruling class are spread more now than ever in the history of the world. And there's lots of people with bigger and bigger audiences hearing it and starting to mention it. And you can be bitter at somebody for well, you played the game and got lots of money. Okay, if that person wants to say maybe this game is bullshit in public and actually mean it, they need a receptive audience among those of us who've been saying this stuff for ages. We need to be able to say, okay, want to have a discussion in public about this? Because that can actually be useful, even if they're still hanging on to status stuff. So, yeah, I would suggest that pro-freedom people make it a point to try to understand what's going on in the mind of people. Now, in government and people in high positions, yeah, a bunch of them are all the way just evil sellouts and they don't give a crap. And they look like Donald Trump, where there is no principle. There's just bullshit propaganda and constant Barnum statements. If you don't know what those are, wait till you see Barnum World. So yeah, there are those. Watch out for them, understand how they function, but be able to distinguish between that and people who just believed and were part of statist bullshit, who then go, wait a minute, maybe this is bullshit. Because that's me. I was that. I was a statist. I was a politically active Republican. Seems like 7,000 years ago, but that was me. And it was probably you. And it was about 90-some% of the voluntarists, used to be that. And guess what? 90-some% of the voluntarists that are going to be are statists right now. And now is when they need to hear these ideas, which means we need to be open to talking to people, even if we're not entirely sure of their motives. Because here and there and here and there, people with big audiences are going to go, maybe you're right. Let's talk about that. That's literally 99% of the challenge, to get this discussion in front of the world. Because when the world hears the possibility of no rulers, no masters, no taxes, no wars, like I all the way own myself, I don't have to pay some local dumbasses just to keep owning my own house, I don't have to get dragged off and put in a cage for having the wrong plant in my backyard, that sounds sort of nice. The world needs to hear that. And right now, the world is more ready to hear that than ever before. And there are people with huge platforms, and because of the existence of the internet and YouTube and all that sort of thing, there are people with huge platforms that if they just go, well, that sounds interesting, let's talk about that, that is huge. Like, I'm still waiting till somebody with a really big audience, somebody gets their ear and says, hey, have you seen that movie Jones Plantation? And they watch it and go, holy crap, okay, let's talk about this. And there have been people with pretty big audiences doing that. But to get a Joe Rogan doing that, that would be huge. And he doesn't have to say, I agree with everything in this. He just has to go, that was sort of impressive and made me think, so let's talk about it. If you get to that point, as I've said before, when people are discussing the question of do we need a ruling class, we already won. Because sooner or later, everybody who's been stomped on is going to go, no, now we don't need a ruling class. The discussion has to happen, and that's the entire challenge, is making that discussion happen. So maybe don't stab people in the back who are in the best possible position to get that discussion in front of huge numbers of people very quickly.